In 2019, a YouGov study in the UK revealed a disturbing fact. 41% of people who became wealthy feel shame or guilt about having money. We're not talking about shady inheritances, not about corruption, not about financial scams. We're talking about ordinary people. People who worked, who built something, who saved, sacrificed, and still feel bad for having succeeded. It's as if the moment their bank account goes up, something inside them drops, as if every achievement comes with a hidden poison, guilt. And that guilt doesn't come from nowhere. It's planted slowly in the movies, in childhood phrases, in whispered comments at family dinners, in the awkward silence when you buy something too expensive. For many, money has stopped being a tool and become a moral statement. To rich, you must be greedy. To frugal, you must be stingy. Successful, someone must be getting exploited. So even when you act ethically, with effort and fairness, you feel like you've broken an invisible code that says you're allowed to improve your life, but not too much. And that's when the trap sets in. You start hiding your wins, downplaying your dreams, sabotaging yourself without realizing it. You spend just to avoid looking arrogant. You avoid talking about money so no one thinks you're obsessed with it. And when things start going well, part of you prepares for the collapse. This silent guilt is more common than you think, and it's expensive, because it keeps you from keeping what you've earned. Because people who feel guilty about money, find a way to lose it. Today, in this episode of CashPhrenia, we're diving deep into that guilt. We'll share the real story of someone who was ashamed of winning, and we'll show you how the biggest barrier between you and wealth might not be the system, or the work, or even luck, but what you've been taught to feel every time something starts to go right. Her name is Ava, and if you looked at her life from the outside, you'd probably think she made it. Daughter of school teachers, raised in a modest neighborhood, Ava grew up hearing that money was unstable, dangerous, and above all unfair. The rich, people said, had privileges no one should have. The poor, even working hard, could barely survive. So from a young age, Ava learned something simple but powerful. Money and ethics don't go hand in hand. But she also learned something else. If she wanted freedom, she'd have to break away from everything she'd been taught. And she did. She got into college on a scholarship, studied digital marketing late at night, started a small e-commerce business at 24, and over time, watched it grow fast. By 30, she had earned her first million. She had a team. She had an audience. She had stability. But she also had something she'd never expected: shame. With every achievement came a whisper of doubt. Am I earning too much? Would my parents be proud? Or think I've changed too much? Am I helping people or just selling dreams? Even with regular donations, fair salaries, and social impact projects, Ava carried something heavy, a sense that she was stealing a seat she didn't belong in. And the scariest part, she couldn't talk to anyone about it. How do you explain being sad because you succeeded? How do you tell someone you feel guilty for having freedom? It was like all her success had become an emotional debt she owed the world, and it started affecting everything. She began sabotaging negotiations, accepting less than she deserved, distancing herself from other successful people, afraid of being like them. And slowly, the brightness and the money began to fade. This is the story we're going to explore today. The story of someone who achieved everything, still felt wrong for doing so. Because maybe the real financial prison is not a lack of resources, but the inability to feel at peace with your own abundance. Ava's rise wasn't a stroke of luck. It was a process. Deliberate, lonely, and at first completely invisible. She started selling handmade candles online. Did everything herself. Production, packaging, customer service, social media. While friends went out, she studied copywriting, sales funnels, and paid ads late into the night. Within months, her first sales began to grow. Then came the compliments. Then, invitations to events. And slowly, Ava realized she was leaving one world and entering another. A world where money wasn't a problem, but a byproduct. At first, it was freeing. She could help her parents. She hired her cousin to manage inventory, took her first international trip. For the first time, she experienced what it felt like to not fear the next month. But what Ava didn't expect was the emotional weight that came with that financial lightness. With every new milestone came a strange discomfort, subtle, hard to name. She noticed her parents, though proud, avoided asking about money. Some friends stopped inviting her out. Others made comments like, "You're too rich for this now, huh?" She began filtering what she said, hiding wins, avoiding numbers, downplaying her lifestyle so she wouldn't seem too far removed from those around her. Instead of celebrating, she began censoring herself. Am I drifting from my roots? Am I becoming insensitive? Is money turning me into someone I don't want to be? These weren't random thoughts. They'd been seeded years ago. In the stories she heard about greedy rich people, in school lessons about morality, sermons about humility, in movies where villains lived in mansions and heroes had nothing but were good. Without realizing it, Ava was experiencing a deep conflict between her new reality and her old identity. She didn't know if she could or should keep all she had built. Even as she felt proud of what she'd achieved, she also felt guilty for being so far removed from the scarcity that shaped her emotional foundation. And that inner conflict began to guide her decisions. She turned down opportunities that felt too big, struggled to raise her prices, felt uncomfortable with public praise. And every time she had a successful launch, part of her wished it hadn't gone too well. Because too much success felt dangerous. That's when she started overcompensating. She gave larger and larger donations, not out of generosity, but guilt. Made risky investments, gave excessive bonuses to her team, even in tight months. The logic was unspoken, but clear. If I keep earning, I need to give it all back fast before people start thinking I'm one of those people. But who were those people? She couldn't say. She just knew she didn't want to look like them, even if she didn't know exactly who they were. That's how the trap begins. When your identity is at war with your reality, something has to give. More often than not, it's your own success. Ava was at her peak, but it was also the beginning of a slow undoing. Because when you're not emotionally comfortable with your own abundance, you start dismantling it through small gestures, impulsive decisions, and above all, through a belief she hadn't yet named, but deeply carried. I don't deserve all this. Ava's fall didn't happen overnight. It came in waves, slow, quiet, almost invisible from the outside. Her business was still making money. Her followers still commented with enthusiasm. The invitations for talks and partnerships kept coming. But inside, Ava was exhausted, drained, confused. It wasn't a financial collapse. It was an emotional breakdown. The first crack was indecision. Once decisive and strategic, she started hesitating over every choice. Took weeks to launch new products. Spent hours obsessing over simple spreadsheets. Sought everyone's advice only to follow none of it. Then came the financial losses, not from reckless spending, but from 1,000 small concessions. Overly generous discounts, marketing campaigns with no return, hiring sprees, investments in projects that didn't match her audience at all. She justified it all with, "It's important to help people who are just starting. I don't want to seem greedy. It's just a phase." But something deeper was happening. An unconscious desire to return to a familiar place. Instability. As uncomfortable as it was, instability was the emotional landscape she knew. It was what made her feel grounded, relatable, acceptable. And the more her income grew, the more she felt like she was drifting from what was right. So she started to self-sabotage more intensely. Turned down $1 million deal with a major retailer, saying it wasn't the right time. Rejected an international partnership due to misaligned values. Skipped restocking inventory during the most profitable season of the year because she didn't want to overdo it. And of course, the numbers dropped. Her team felt it, as the market noticed. But Ava felt a strange sense of relief, like she had finally returned to her place. Less visibility, less pressure, less risk of seeming arrogant, less guilt, as she was earning less. But she no longer had to wrestle with the discomfort of having too much. This warped logic was invisible even to her, but her body noticed. Insomnia, anxiety, sudden crying spells, difficulty focusing, a growing urge to walk away from it all. And one day she did. Announced the sabbatical, said she needed to reconnect with her essence, wanted to go back to the beginning. People applauded her courage, left kind messages, praised her wisdom. But in the dark of her apartment with her phone off, Ava cried. Not because she was sad to step away, but because, for the first time, she realized she had never allowed herself to truly win. Every decision of the past few months had been a slow, deliberate undoing. She had built everything, but didn't know how to sustain it, because every time she looked at her own success, she saw a distorted reflection of what she believed was right. And no matter how rationally she knew she deserved it, emotionally, she didn't believe it. The guilt had been eating away at her internal structure. And in the end, she pushed over the castle she had built with her own hands. Not because she wanted to fail, but because something deep inside her whispered, "You shouldn't be here." And like all emotional systems, seeking coherence, Ava finally returned to a place that made sense. Uncertainty, doubt, fear, the place where she no longer felt like a fraud, but instead at home. What Ava experienced wasn't coincidence, nor lack of preparation, nor bad luck. It was the precise result of a deep-hand, very common psychological error, the moralization of wealth. We're taught to associate money with morality, not just as a tool, but as a character statement. Rich people are cold, poor people are humble, earning too much is greedy, struggling is noble. These subtle narratives shape our identity. They condition us to believe that in order to be a good person, we must suffer a little, and that's where the error begins. The human mind seeks coherence. Coherence between what we experience and what we believe to be true, between what we have and what we feel we deserve. When external reality like financial success clashes with internal belief like good people Dante have too much, it creates cognitive dissonance, and the brain hates dissonance, so it chooses. Either change the belief or sabotage the reality. In Ava's case, the belief won. She believed that having too much made her less human. That prosperity meant disconnecting from her origins. That earning more than her parents, her friends, the average was a betrayal. She never said this out loud, but she felt it. That's how the pattern takes shape. The more success gives, the more guilt. The more guilt gives, the more sabotage. The more sabotage gives, the more proof that success wasn't meant for her. It's a toxic cycle, but frighteningly common. Psychologists call it the upper limit problem. It's an internal emotional ceiling we build from the stories we're told, and we begin to treat it as an unbreakable law. Eva believed there was a point she wasn't allowed to cross. Beyond that line, she wouldn't be safe. She'd be judged. She'd lose her purity. It's the cruelest part. She's not alone. Thousands of people go through this same internal war. Executives who get massive bonuses and quickly fall into unnecessary debt. Entrepreneurs who shut down their businesses just as things take off. Artists who walk away at the height of their careers. Everyday people who, when life improves, quietly begin to destroy what they've built. Not because they can't handle success, but because they feel emotionally unworthy of it. They've internalized the belief that having is wrong, that having too much is immoral. Sustaining prosperity is a quiet form of betrayal. This is the psychological error. A mental program that uses guilt to limit abundance. The solution isn't just reading more finance books or tweaking your habits. The real shift lies in rebuilding your emotional identity. You have to start seeing yourself as someone who can have without losing themselves, who can grow without hurting others, who can become wealthy and still remain human. Money doesn't transform character, it only amplifies it. If you're generous, you'll give more. If you're ethical, your impact will grow. If you're conscious, your voice will carry further. Ava didn't need to run from her prosperity. She needed to learn how to inhabit it, not as an imposter, but as someone who understands that growing is also an act of courage. Feeling good about your success isn't arrogance, it's freedom. Ava didn't lose everything because she was irresponsible, or untalented, or unrepaired. She lost because she didn't believe she was allowed to keep what she had built. Because the guilt she carried was heavier than her bank balance. Because emotionally, success felt like betrayal. That's the most invisible trap of prosperity. When it arrives, if you don't feel you belong with it, you'll find ways to reject it. And this happens more than people admit. It doesn't matter how much you make, if deep down you believe money is dirty, or that too much means you're becoming less human, or that growing too far disconnects you from where you came from, then you'll unconsciously seek to return to emotional safety, scarcity. But it's not a life sentence. The mind can be reprogrammed. Guilt can be questioned. Your identity can be rebuilt. There are 3 practical lessons for breaking this invisible cycle. 1. Question the moral narratives you inherited. List the phrases you heard about money growing up. Money is the root of all evil. The rich won't enter heaven. If someone has a lot, it's because they took from others. Now ask yourself, are these facts or just repeated opinions? You don't have to keep living by someone else's emotional framework. You can write a new story, one built on awareness, integrity, and freedom. 2. Notice your emotional reactions to success. When something starts going well, what's your instinct? You celebrate or feel uneasy? Grateful or suspicious? Do you feel proud or like an imposter? These responses reveal the emotional ceiling you've placed on yourself, and once you see it, you can rise above it. 3. Build a new identity of abundance. You can be someone who grows with integrity, who earns well without leaving people behind, who becomes wealthy without losing their soul. But that starts with seeing yourself as someone who truly belongs in that space, without guilt, without apology, without shame. Because prosperity isn't just a financial condition, it's an act of emotional permission. You have to allow yourself to have, to keep, to enjoy. Ava didn't fail because she couldn't handle success. She failed because she didn't recognize herself in the person she had become. And maybe that's the hardest part about winning. Learning to see yourself as someone who can thrive and still be good. If you've made it this far, it's probably because some part of this story echoed inside you. Maybe not exactly like Ava's. Maybe you've never made $1 million. But at some point, you felt guilty for something that went right. Maybe you hit a win, downplayed an achievement, turned down an opportunity, or distanced yourself from someone else's success just so you wouldn't feel small. This subtle, quiet guilt is one of the greatest thieves of emotional wealth, because it doesn't just take your money, it takes your freedom. The freedom to become who you're meant to be. To grow without fear, to take up the space you fought to create. And the cruelest part, it disguises itself as humility, as responsibility, as social awareness. But underneath it all, it's just an outdated emotional program that says, too much success makes you a bad person. So here's an invitation. Pause for a moment. Close your eyes. And ask yourself with radical honesty, is there a part of me that believes becoming rich makes me less worthy? Is there a part of me that feels guilty when things go right? If the answer is yes, even a small yes, then congratulations, you've just cracked the code, because awareness is the first step to healing. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments, write, what's the one belief about money that shaped your thinking the most, and that you now realize is holding you back? Maybe it's something your parents said, or a line from a movie, a story from school. Whatever it is, share it, because when you speak it out loud, you start to release it. And when others read it, they recognize themselves too. And together, we begin to dismantle the silence that keeps us in smaller lives than we deserve. Here on CashPhrenia, we don't just talk about money. We talk about the mind behind the money, the hidden feelings that drive our decisions, the quiet beliefs that shape our financial reality. And if this resonated with you, consider subscribing, not because you need to get rich fast, but because maybe you just need to remember that it's okay to grow, that you can thrive without leaving people behind, that you can prosper without becoming someone else, and above all, that you no longer have to carry guilt for something you built with dignity. If freedom is the ultimate form of wealth, then maybe your journey doesn't start with money, but with simply accepting that you deserve to feel free